like to call to order the special meeting for the Planning Commission Citizen Advisory Committee, City of Lowell, for Monday, August 14th, 2017. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Sue, roll call, please.
Commissioner Chambers?
Here.
Commissioner Salzweedl?
Here.
Commissioner Zanstra?
Here.
Commissioners Cadwalder, Gerard, and Thielander are all absent tonight, and Chair Barker.
I would move that we excuse the three members.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Members are excused. Thank you. Approval of agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda as written?
I make a motion we approve the agenda as written.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion, or the agenda is approved. Is there any public comments before we get started? And thank you very much for coming. We appreciate it. As I look at doing the master plan review, which is what this special meeting is all about, we are required by law to review it. It does not mean that we need to change it or do any of those things. However, the last time it was put together in its entirety was 2007. 5 years ago, it was renewed as required under law. So we are looking at what we need to do this time around. Do we simply renew it? Do we make some alterations? Do we change it? Do we add new things to it? Do we take away things? All of those kinds of requirements. So this will be the start of that process. And we're always looking, obviously, for citizen input as well as staff and our commissioners here and our Williams and Works bright guy here, Andy. So we do appreciate everybody that is working on this process. We will have this meeting until 7 o'clock, at which point we will adjourn the meeting, and then we will open up our normal monthly meeting at 7 o'clock, and within that we actually have a public hearing as well and a site plan. So we will, and then we will probably pick up the master plan discussion after that. This is by no means, it is simply a start. And all I can ask everybody is to give us your best opinions, what you think we should do and why and all those kinds of things. And please feel very free to be vocal. There are no right answers here, there's no wrong answers. There's mainly questions and taking a hard look at what we need to do for the citizens of Lowell and keeping the city compliant with state laws. So all of those kinds of things are under the jurisdiction of the master plan. So having said that, and with no comments, I would like to open it up to Andy to please go over.
Bruce?
Yeah,
Bruce. Can I make a motion that we move the site plan up to do that now?
No, we're going to do that at 7 o'clock.
We're going to do the site plan at 7?
Yep,
Okay.
yep, different meeting. This one is just entirely for the, thank you though, this meeting is strictly for the master plan. So having said that, Andy, would you go through, you gave us some notes here and kind of walk us through the master plan if you would.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, as Bruce mentioned, I put together a memo, kind of a review back in June when we kind of started talking about this. And this isn't something where I'm kind of picking apart the master plan and finding stuff that's good or bad. It's just kind of some observations that I have and what I really am looking for from the planning commission. I think what you guys need to decide is if an update is necessary. And the reason why that's an important question is because if you decide to do an update, it's not just as simple as writing some stuff down and approving it next month. an update to the master plan is going to be, at a minimum, probably a 6-month process, and there will be a number of chapters and sections of the master plan that we would review, provide some updates to either within the document or as a separate kind of supplemental document that would be approved. So it can potentially be a long process. I would say minimum 6 months, more likely would probably be 9 months until it's formally completely adopted and done by City Council. And so there is, because there is a fair amount of time and effort and expense involved in doing this, I want you guys to fairly carefully consider what's in the current plan. And basically what I want you guys to do is, based on what's in there and based what the policies are and what the direction is that's given in the 2007 plan, is make a determination as to, do we need to update it? Do we need to change anything? If you look at all this and say, this all looks good, this is still where I think we need to go and where the city needs to go, then you don't need to update anything. You can just say, okay, we're still good with it, and we'll revisit this again in 5 years, in 2022. So with that being said, we'll kind of walk through, just kind of hit the highlights of this brief memorandum that I wrote back in June. So what I did is basically just kind of broke down the master plan into a few different sections and focused on what are some of the things that we would need to be looking at with a master plan update. Most master plans, including this one, starts off with some discussion on just the overall background profile of the city. So it looks at, the first chapter, for example, looks at demographics and housing. So population numbers, the age of your population, racial characteristics, age, how you're aging, things like that. And so obviously, because this was last done in 2007, most of the information there is based on 2000 census data. So there is an opportunity there, obviously, at a minimum, to update it to 2010 census information, and where more accurate or better data is available, we might be able to find some more recent information just to bring some of that base demographic stuff up to date. I think the value of that, if you're inclined to do it, is that it gives you a better idea of what you're working with. So if the overall makeup of the community has changed, then you might need to think about different kinds of housing policy, different kinds of recreation amenities, things like that you need to consider. If in doing this update you find that the city's demographic makeup is pretty much the same as it was in 2007, which honestly is kind of what I would expect, then maybe any significant policy changes aren't necessary. But again, we're not going to know that until we dig into the research and do a bunch of work on it.
Can we take, could we update the demographics without doing a complete update of the master plan?
Sure. I mean, we can certainly put together a report that just outlines what's changed. If anything, I expect, and I did some research beforehand, and so some of the things that have happened to a lot of cities and villages throughout Michigan that are about your size, your population shrunk, I think, a little bit, not a lot, but a small amount, probably less than 5%. I think most communities your size got a little bit older as far as the median age was concerned. So again, not surprising, but typically we see in most communities that your average household size is shrinking, your average age is getting older, and that's not good or bad. It just is what it is. Younger people are typically either having fewer kids, they're waiting longer to have kids. Many of them are moving into larger cities, in your case, places like Grand Rapids. And the baby boom generation has gotten older. And so since there are more of them than there are relative to some of the other age groups, that's what drives a lot of that increase in the median age of the city. So that's some of the stuff that we've seen, again, just based on a very cursory review of the census information, things like that from 2010. Now, that being said, 2010 was already 7 years ago. And so again, the last 7 years, I think, have been a bit different from the previous 10 leading up to 2010 because we saw the economy in recession really, bottomed out in that 2008 to 2009. So a lot of places where the population was growing very quickly, it slowed way down. And so, some of those changes I think might be a little bit different looking at where we are now in 2017, or if we wait until 2020 or 2021 or 2022, when newer information becomes available, we might see a very different trend from the previous 10 years. So I guess to answer your question, yes, we can certainly look at some of this stuff. It wouldn't be a formal master plan update, so there's, the policy stuff wouldn't change if you didn't update the plan, but if there is interest amongst the planning commission and just kind of an overall snapshot profile of the community that wouldn't be formally incorporated into your master plan, that's something that could certainly be done.
Any discussion whatsoever?
Andy, when you look at the overall population, I know this is just a city, is it also taking effect the surrounding communities and how much they're growing that affects our parks and other things that take some of our utilities, such as the water and the sewer, and as they expand out in the suburbs? Is that taken into consideration or not really?
Yeah, well, it is, and so when we look at the city's population, that's looking at just the city,
Right.
so just the people that live within the physical boundaries of the city. Now, usually what we do with the master plan update, and your master plan has this too, not only does it talk about the population within the physical boundaries of the city, but it also looks at, primarily Lowell and Virginia's townships are your main drivers to what's going to affect your growth. Although to a lesser degree, there's probably some impact on growth in Ada Township too. Some of them might come to Lowell for certain things, but generally those three townships, and historically in previous assignments that we've done for the city or for Virginia's Township, whether it's a joint recreation plan or other joint planning exercises, it's always been those three that have kind of partnered up to do something like that. So yeah, we would look at that, and there are certainly implications to growth in Lowell Township and Virginia Township that affect you guys. I mean, people from all three communities, for example, participate in, youth sports and parks, and they go to your restaurants and all that kind of thing. So yeah, there's definitely some impact there, and that's something that we would take a look at.
Sewer, Mike? Nothing at this point? I do have one quick question on page 8. Number 3 under conclusions, it says different housing types on the south side of the township. Some kind of I'm assuming that should be city. Under conclusions there, number 3. At the end of the sentence there, it's the south side of the township.
Yeah, I don't know.
It seemed odd, because we're talking about the city all the way through, and all of a sudden, I just noticed it.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that's in there.
Seemed odd. Okay. So we can change, correct me if I'm wrong, it would not be changing the master plan as much as an addition or an appendix?
Yeah, well, we can't officially incorporate anything into the master plan without opening it up for a full amendment, where there's notification, public review time, all that stuff built in. So anything that we do that is any kind of master plan amendment that we're going to use as any kind of, land use policy, we should do it as part of a master plan update. If we can certainly, like I said, provide just a report or an update on all that community profile stuff, but if you're going to use that to change policy, then you might as well just update the plan. Because in the master plan, the primary usefulness for doing the snapshot kind of logic is that if you want to know where you're going, you got to know where you are first. So you have to know how your community is made up before you start making policy on how it should be going forward. And so if we were to do a report that that shows a bunch of changes, then we don't do anything with it after that, then I don't know how useful it's going to be, because you can't really, you're not making any decisions based on this new information. It's just, here it is, and it's useful and it's helpful, but it's more difficult to, set policy when you don't have anything, and when it's not something that's official and tied into your master plan. So, I mean, one thing that we could do, for example, if there was interest amongst the planning commissioners, we could do kind of this update and look at the changes, and if you determine that your population is more or less the same, the makeup is kind of the same, your ages and your demographics are kind of the same, and the other existing conditions are pretty much the same, maybe then you decide, well, I guess we don't need to do anything. But I think that's also only part of the conversation. I mean, we also have to looking at the goals, looking at the future land use map and future land use plan, and just seeing if this will make sense. As the planner, we've seen a few times when there's been rezonings and stuff presented. Usually it's fine, but there are a handful of property or areas where we kind of look at that and go, well, I'm not sure that makes sense based on what's proposed now, or sometimes things just happen that you don't anticipate happening when you write the plan, and that doesn't mean that they shouldn't happen. I mean, it could be a great thing. It's just something that you didn't anticipate, and so now, sometimes with the plan update, we also need to look at, in certain areas, maybe we need to add flexibility in the future land use map to address, changing circumstances, changing market forces, or partially driving land uses and development in the city. So, and we'll get to that in a minute. I can provide you with a little more specific examples of that.
Do you want to look at the conclusions on page 8 as an example and kind of go through those?
Sure.
I mean, we're dealing obviously with 17-year-old numbers.
Right.
And the new ones really won't be available until, what, 2022?
Yeah, I mean, so we're looking at 17-year-old numbers, and we updated it to 2010 data. We're still looking at 7-year-old numbers. Right now, they do the American Community Survey and other 5-year estimates, but in our experience, those have been not that reliable. With the American Community Survey, they're taking a survey, and sometimes they're talking to too small of a number of people, so sometimes your margin of error is really big, too big to be useful. So I don't know if that's the case here, but that's something that we have to be careful of. And so there are estimates out that the state does, and that the U.S. Census Bureau does as well, that will help us. But it's typically, I don't find it to be as reliable as the actual count that you get.
Well, let's go through the conclusions there on page 8 and see if there's anything that really sticks out for this portion of it, at least.
So the first one says, as evidenced by the stagnant household and population growth, the city is largely built out. Increases in population and household will have to come from increases in density on already utilized parcels of land. I mean, I would find that to be probably generally true. There are a few areas where new development is possible, but
Generally speaking,
yeah. I mean, there's not a lot of there's not a ton of empty fields laying around. There are 80 acres that someone can go build a couple hundred houses on.
Right.
So that's probably generally true. Number 2 says school enrollment is anticipated to be fairly stable given the age distribution of the population in 2000. I don't know how much that's changed.
That would be fairly easy to contact the school and find that out, right?
Yes. Number 3 says that as the mature family's age group moves towards retirement, their housing choices may have implications for the demand for new and different housing types on the south side of the township. Now, I don't know if that's talking about Virgins Township or not. I mean, maybe, but I honestly have no idea what this is talking about specifically.
I would think there should be a period after types. and on the south side of the township, just stricken, frankly. I mean, that would make more sense. It just seems like it would make more sense.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, yeah, I just don't know what the context is for that.
Yeah.
For that sentence.
Anybody recall?
No, I don't remember.
No. No. Dean, you remember? No. Okay.
The fourth one of these conclusions reads that as the retirement age group increases in size, demand for services for senior citizens and elderly residents are likely to grow. That's probably true. The one caveat I would add there is that there have been a handful of instances where we've seen that your median age it's gone up for a number of years, and in a few places it leveled off or it even decreased a little bit from 20 to 2010, or it wouldn't surprise me in some instances to see that from 2010 to 2020 when that is done. That said, I have no idea what's going to happen, obviously. But I think as a general statement, that's probably true. I mean, seniors they have different needs from their local government people who are 10 or 20 or 30. It's just a simple fact.
And I'm going to combine this. I'm assuming the housing is pretty much the exact same. Can you go to the summary and conclusions on page 11 for the housing summary and conclusions?
Yep, so
and I think it's going to be very similar in nature.
I think so too. The first one reads that the city of Lowell contains a similar housing stock to the county and state as a whole. I guess I don't know. I can look into that in detail. It wouldn't surprise me if that maintained its
Correct.
truth. Number two says the housing unit growth in the city was very low during the 90s, again reflecting the largely built-out nature of the city. I would anticipate that to be true again as well. Number three, median housing values in the city are lower than the comparison communities, although the growth in median home value is consistent with those communities. This indicates that home values in the city are a relative bargain when compared with the surrounding area, particularly given the expectation that the home will continue to appreciate at a rate consistent with the surrounding areas. That one is really interesting to me because, the recession had a pretty heavy impact everywhere. And I don't know whether it hit places like Lowell harder or not compared with the Virgins or Lowell townships or Ada townships or Cascades or any of your neighboring communities. It wouldn't surprise me if that was the case, but I just don't know. And I'm not sure what the values are relative to surrounding municipalities of your size. I mean, I wouldn't compare the median housing values here to what's in Ada or Cascade or something, but if we look at places like Coopersville or Rockford or Caledonia, where it's similar lots, similar age, similar size villages or cities, that might be a more viable comparison. And I don't know what that would bring about, but it would be something worth exploring if there was inclination to do so.
I guess my point on both the housing and the population, the conclusions and the summaries, are that they are pretty much status quo outside of being 17 years old.
Great.
Okay. Thank you. Any other comments on chapter 1? Okay. Let's try to go through existing conditions, chapter 2.
So this chapter primarily addresses three sort of general areas. One of them is physical geography and land use. The second one I said was public facilities and services, and three was public input. So the first one is pretty static for the most part in 10 years. Obviously, the physical geography of the layout of the city has not changed much. I mean, other than a few small things here. There basically the floodplain hasn't changed and things of that nature. Same thing with land use. There have been several projects and site plans and things like that we've looked at over the last several years, but not anything that's terribly different from the way it's
This
been.
existing land use.
Right, yeah, I mean, if you look at existing land use when that was written in 2007 and compare it to what, just how you know things to be today based on living here, you're not gonna see a ton of differences. Maybe a few, but I don't know that you would see enough that you would say, oh my gosh, this is like a completely different town. So to me, I don't see a tremendous change since then. You know, similarly, I would kind of make the same observation when it comes to public facilities and services, although there's probably more change there than there has been in other places when we're talking about infrastructure and, you know, addressing some of the growth that's occurred in Virginia Township, for example. There hasn't been a lot, but there's been some, and so there's some data in there that probably could be updated as far as, you know, water distribution system, your sewer system, the amount it collects, how much water you use, things like that. Some of the data in there can probably be updated. Now, whether or not that has significant implications moving forward, I don't know. I kind of think it probably won't, but it's possible. So,
I certainly would be concerned if we're, you know, at capacity for water supply or
Right.
capacity for wastewater treatment.
Right.
Things of that nature, and
Right.
obviously we have added
Right.
some stuff.
right.
Or even light power, yes.
Yeah. Then the third topic there, public input, that basically addresses and looks at the results of the public input conducted in support of that 2007 plan. So, I mean, hasn't been done, so that's kind of irrelevant to this discussion. Now, if we were to amend our plan, we would probably suggest another, you know, some kind of a public input survey or a couple of meetings or something to get some input on an update, and so we would supplement this chapter with new data, but for the purposes of a review, obviously, we can't change the results of the data, because it is what it is, and it's a snapshot of what the results were in 2006 or 7, whenever that was completed. So in that case, they did a community input survey in 2006, October, it looks like. They had about 300 responses, and so it's just talks about, you know, a variety of characteristics and either at the time or a bunch of characteristics looking at, you know, what people want and what people like, things like that moving forward. So as part of an update, we could, for example, ask the same questions and conduct a survey in the same way, and then allows you to compare the responses and see if there's any significant variation in your results. That could be one option for something to do moving forward, but it's not necessary. It's just something to consider at this point.
The other question that I had was on, I guess on page 23, the public facility services and recreation. And obviously, the streets and sidewalks are still a major concern.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that would change necessarily after what we have here. I mean, I'm not sure it would change, but if that would be something that we would want to take a further look at in more, I guess, in detail.
Mm-hmm.
Along with the water and water treatment services.
Right.
I guess lighting power, making sure that we're not going to all of a sudden 4 years from now or 3 years from now run into a situation where we're running out of power, as an example.
Yeah, and a lot of that information is probably available now from talking with, you know, Light Power or your engineer. You can probably get the answers to a lot of those questions from talking to either city staff, consultants, or whoever, and get that information together. As far as the streets go, I know it seemed like a year or two ago, there was some work done that looked at, you know, what the plan was for paving and maintaining streets and how all these things are done. I don't know, you know, moving forward, if there was a detailed assessment done as far as if you're on track to be able to maintain and pay for everything, or if you're gonna fall short at some point. That'd be an interesting analysis for sure.
Mike, that may be something at some point in time, that would be helpful, I think, for this commission to know where, where the city is, or, what you would like us to look at, frankly, in that regard. Infrastructure, particularly, is what I'm thinking. I mean, sometimes, the council would just rather do it themselves, or it's already been done, and there's no reason for us to sit here and try to redo it. I mean, that's senseless. So I guess at some point, if you would kind of, just do a point-by-point tickler list or something along that line, at least with the infrastructure of where you see we stand now. And if you think that you would like us to take a closer look at something, or the council would, whoever would make that decision, I guess. It seems to me as though there's no sense of us or Andy wasting our time on something that's already been done.
Normally road projects, things of that nature usually don't go through planning commission.
Right.
Yeah, they're usually dealt with administratively, and probably the council would weigh in, I would think, or depending on who does the project, if the DDA is doing it, the DDA would weigh in.
Okay. Well, my point is that if there is kind of going through this master plan here, the public facility portion of it, if you can kind of just do a tickler list and say.
However, if we were doing park upgrades or something of that nature, those do have to come through. That's
Right.
state law, I believe.
Right, yes. So, I mean, that's the question mark, though. If you want us to spend some time on it or not, that's fine. I mean, either way, it doesn't matter to us, but if we know that, then we'll know what we need to look for. And that would be helpful.
Mike, didn't you say you're about another year out from that study of everything coming
We're about
across?
a year and a half
Yeah,
out
yeah.
for where we can, for where
Well,
we
see, that makes a big difference as to whether or not we decide if we're gonna do anything, or just kind of say, okay, at this point, let's just update some numbers so that we know where we're at least, and go from there. So, okay. Anything else on existing conditions, chapter 2? Andy, do you have anything else on that? I think we pretty well covered it. Commissioners, anything? Staff? Okay. Having said that, I would like to suspend our special meeting on the master plan, and we will continue it actually, hopefully, during our regular meeting, which we will start right now. So, any objections to simply suspending it, commissioners?
None.
Okay.
Do you need a motion?
I don't think we do we? No.
Okay.
No. I'm comfortable with that. We'll just unsuspend it later on. Okay? Now, having said that, however, I do need to call to order the regular meeting of the Planning Commission Citizen Advisory Committee, City of Lowell, for Monday, August 14th. We've already been called to order. We've already pledged allegiance. We've already done our roll call, so we're going to skip all of that. I would